Hello, dear viewers. Thank you so much for joining me today. Well, today I'd like to read first about Myanmar because they had recently the bloodiest protest and 38 killed. This is the nation, Burma, where there was a military coup over a couple months ago, and Aung San Suu Kyi, their democratically elected leader, was imprisoned, and there have been protests ever since. The military took over, and it's frightening over there, but let us see what it looks like into the future. Okay, how are we doing? We have the Three of Wands. I feel like that's the world looking sort of with some anxiety. Like, the Three of Wands suggests some nations have tried to help, but just a beginning. And then we have the Temperance Angel. Wow, I like that. So gradually things may calm down. Hope. We should be hopeful. Oh, I'm glad they get that card. There's angelic help. They should be hopeful. The world is watching, and that's a good thing. Sanctions, things like that, may deter the new government, and I'm sorry, I see it as the new government, from repeating this. Okay, what they did this last weekend. Near future, next few months. Four of Coins, kind of a holding pattern is what I'm seeing. Six of Cups, they've had this kind of thing before. They've had political upheaval like this before. They had a more powerful military, and it kind of never really went away, right? So, you know, I hate to say it, I don't see Aung San Suu Kyi reinstated. I see this government becoming more established and using more constraint. Let's see. Queen of Coins, but Aung San Suu Kyi is not, she's all right. Okay. By all right, you know, I still feel like she's being kept tabs on, but she's healthy and whole. Okay. What about the next few months after that? We have the Five of Wands. We have a lot of political debate. Political debate can happen still. We do have protests still. Okay. Knight of Coins. Well, and now the new government is trying to take better care of its people, trying to get on with the business of being a new government, governing. Okay, starting to. But there's this Wheel of Fortune. Yeah, I just feel like, try as they might, they're going to have to govern. You know, they're going to have to govern. They're going to have to govern in some kind of way that the worldwide community doesn't condemn and sanction them. They're going to need to do some things for their people. They're going to need to use more restraint. And I feel like that Wheel of Fortune is, try as they might, they're not going to be able to stop their people from gaining in freedoms over the years. It is the information age. And their young people are educated. And yeah, they're not, in one way or another, they're educated. And this will not quit. They want democracy. They want democracy. They want a representative government. So, but this I do believe they will be working on for quite some time. So that's what I'm seeing with Myanmar. Okay. They don't go, you know, to to more extreme dictatorship is what I'm seeing. Although there is martial law right now on the ground there in many places. When is that? Is that continue, Spirit? For a while. It continues for a little while. But then there's sort of indecision. Do we let go? Do we back off? Do we not? The Justice card. And the two swords, right? And the two scales. I think that means that the martial law remains in certain places. But it's much more restricted. Like we're just here to deal with this, with the protests. We're not here to, deal with everything else. That kind of thing. Okay. All right. Well, we wish all the best to those in Myanmar. Interesting nation. Many ethnic groups. Part of the population there. So, Aung San Suu Kyi, I do want to look at her future. Let's see. 7 of Swords. She has a plan. 6 of Coins. 9 of Coins. They've got to improve her quarters. Yeah, if not, let her go altogether, because the world is watching. The world is watching. So I think that things will be improving actually for her, but I don't see her being allowed to come back into power either. So there we have it. All right. What about, but then we have this victory card on the bottom. The people, I think, are ultimately victorious. All right. Well, I wanted to look at Beijing and Hong Kong, right? Because apparently Beijing's getting more and more control over Hong Kong. Now that's the situation, remember, where, and I may not be saying this exactly right, but where Hong Kong had a deal that they could be democratically self-governed. I believe it was for 50 years. After no longer a territory of the UK, but China has cut that way short and said, well, no, that's too bad. We're going to demand that we are able to extradite people from Hong Kong to Beijing to be tried, and that would be including political dissidents. So it's been a problem. There have been protests. So let's look at Hong Kong. Right now we have the Ace of Swords. The truth really wants to come out. We have a lot of press, a lot of free press, still a lot of press still saying what's going on. Okay. Yeah, we do have young protesters determined to make a difference. I just don't feel like, yeah, I feel like Beijing will have more control over Hong Kong, will have more to say, but yet there's some places they won't go. There's some barriers they will not cross just because they feel like it's not worth it to incur the wrath of some other governments or to have any consequences by the U.S. They are very frustrated by free press, by the press there. Very frustrated. It just grates. But they use some constraint in the future. 3 of Coins, like let's make a new agreement. Let's make a new agreement. Okay. But after a delay. So I think things continue sort of as they are for a while. In fact, I think they try to usurp more liberties, but that doesn't go well because the press is still talking about it and the worldwide press is still listening. And then they have to make some sort of agreement where there's sort of quasi democracy. Yeah, and it's not what they had, but But the whole country, China, the whole country is moving toward demanding greater individual rights. Tentatively, carefully, but the young people, there will be more young people willing to protest. In Beijing, in China. It's been a long time since Tiananmen Square. I don't see another Tiananmen Square. That was a massacre. I see more like, we'll try to accommodate, give them the impression that they have, some rights here, and maybe even grant some more rights, but we're still in charge, the Chinese government. Chinese Communist Party is still in charge. So yeah, okay. So I see the protests helping eventually. All right, and I see many more in the mainland joining in those protests or speaking out about it, social media and things like that. Okay, so this is interesting. It'll be a bumpy ride, but I see the Chinese people both in Hong Kong and on the mainland increasing their individual rights gradually. It's so sad, though, for Hong Kong, who wasn't supposed to have their democracy infringed upon so soon. Okay. What about in the U.S.? Let's look at the U.S. protests, because I don't know if it was Xi Jinping or another Chinese official who said, well, the U.S., that's rich, you criticizing us, basically, because of the way the U.S. handled protesters last summer, especially that terrible scene on Lafayette Square when all manner of stuff was let loose on protesters, rubber bullets and tear gas, and, there were serious injuries, and wow, just so Trump could cross that square to go for a photo op. Yeah, that is a stain. And look, it's being brought up now, as it should be. But let's see about protests in the U.S. We have a different president now. 8 of Cups. I feel like that's sort of Biden, just not taking a public stance on them frequently. He's doing that about a number of issues where he's just sort of, okay, I'm not commenting on that. Yeah. I mean, not that he's going to let it just go out of control, any of the protests, but I just don't think he sees that as an urgent issue. 3 of Cups. He is hoping to, increase more of the positivity in those movements. So, there were protests on the anniversary of Breonna Taylor's death, right? And she was the young woman who was just sleeping in her bed, and a no-knock warrant, and they battered her door down, and her boyfriend didn't know what was going on, and the police started shooting they thought to defend themselves, but they killed Breonna. And her family has now settled with the city. Wrongdoing was found. Well, I guess I can't say it was found because it's a settlement, but basically. So what I think Biden wants to encourage the positive aspects, the positive elements of these protests. That protest was quite peaceful. And again, as in many of the kinds of Black Lives Matter protests and vigils, just folks, they're not coming armed, they're coming and they're singing, and they're sometimes bringing their kids, and it's like that, So what about the protests that go into the night in certain areas deep within cities, and they get kind of out of hand. Well, they're watching and waiting, so definitely it's being monitored. We have the Empress pregnant with the possibility, they're ear to the ground. FBI has ear to the ground. Like we're looking for, are there domestic terrorist groups, especially the domestic terrorist groups? They are more concerned about that now, as they should have been all along. Yeah, because the FBI saw that as the larger threat. Antifa is not known for being organized, an organized sort of armed or any kind of danger. It's more like a ideological movement, anti-fascism. So yeah, they are being monitored, ear on the ground. Okay. Success, completion. I don't think we're going to have a lot of troubles in those protests. Not to say that reinforcements wouldn't be called in, they may be. But I just don't see Biden becoming invested in, okay, we're going to end this, completely disperse this. He's just not. Why would you do that? Does want to prevent illegal behavior. Yes. Yeah, I think the moon. There's lots going on behind the scenes. He's just not going to be commenting about a lot of that. Although I think he's perfectly capable of getting up there and say, hey, protest all you want, but illegal behavior or dangerous behavior is not going to be tolerated, okay? You cannot burn the buildings around you. You can't. I see him doing that. But mostly I think he's going to try to emphasize the positive aspects and help the positive narrative of those protests. So that is a definite positive shift. And I feel like the domestic terrorists are no longer interested in doing, doing a lot of public, huge things coordinated like the insurrection. I think they're more behind the scenes. All right. Well, I just wanted to look at protests for democracy in a few different places. Oh, Russia. I should look at Russia because they've had a lot more protests too, because Alexei Navalny was imprisoned right after being poisoned and then brought back. And the U.S., we had officials here making strong statements about that. So what about Russia? What about the Russian protests? Opportunity is given 2 of Cups. There's a wider variety of people involved in those protests now. So that's interesting. New beginning. They continue. 2 of Wands. I feel like there's 2 protesters from 2 different political parties, and they're sort of like, but they have enough in common. They move forward. Yeah, it's fate. It's time for some change there. So they will continue. They will continue. Yeah. Okay. And I don't see the Russian government trying to stomp them out. They want to protect against negative press as well. Though, I mean, not to say that there may not be some scenes, but yeah, I just think the protests do continue. They're not ended. They're not stomped out. They do continue. And in fact, they have an effect. So that's interesting. All right. Well, I thank you all so much. I do believe in democracy. I do feel like it's inspired, and we shall see how things go. I think there's a movement, across the world. The citizens of most nations would like democracy. So, and it is the age of information where they may be more likely to have a voice to talk about it. 6 of Coins. Yeah, I think we're coming into a time where more autocratic leaders have to give a little, have to give a little, have to give a little. in the way of loosening controls. And maybe hope to just give a little because they want stability. All right. Well, that's what I'm seeing. I thank you all so very much. You take care. Bye-bye.